Hello, everyone, and we're live. I'm Dr. John Herding here with George Zirkel today. What's going on, George? How are you?
John, how we doing?
I'm good, man. It's my pleasure once again to have one of the what I consider top movement professionals in the area, the Philadelphia area, on. And George, rather than myself, I say it every time, rather than myself give the bio, you're going to give a better bio of who you are, what you do than I do. So let's just get right into it and let the people know who you are, what you're doing, what makes you unique, and kind of how you got into the space of doing what you're doing now.
Sure. My current role, I am the director of pitching at Ascent Athlete. So, I work with anywhere from youth, high school, college, pro, big league, arms, um, to help them, reach their goals as a pitcher. Um, that's kind of the short version of what my job is and what I'm doing. I would say, to give a little bit of backstory, like I grew up playing baseball. Uh, wasn't a very good baseball player, but I always loved it and I always kept playing. I went to Susquehanna University, a small school out in central Pennsylvania. So I played there for 4 years. Um, while I was doing that and while I was in my undergrad, I started coaching travel baseball. So, I kind of always knew that I wanted to stay involved in the game and coach, do these sorts of things for a long term. And then after my sophomore year at Susquehanna, I tore my UCL. So, going through that rehab process, as I was going through it, I started to research and read and, dive into why did I get hurt? Why wasn't I very good to begin with? And that passion kept growing and growing, and I decided to after I graduated, I wanted to make coaching my career. So I was still with the travel ball org that I had been coaching with, the New Jersey Niners out in they're in central New Jersey, and shortly after, I accepted a job out in California doing player development out there. And then I was out there for about a year, came back, and a friend of mine had been working at MSI, Maple Zone Sports Institute, we're now Ascent Athlete. He'd been working. He's like, "Hey man, do you want to come? And there's these pro guys that I'm working with. Do you want to come out and help me work with them a little bit?" And I said, "Sure." So started coming out to give him an extra set of hands, and one thing led to another. He got hired by the Astros. That's Ezra Bai. He's currently the rehab pitching coach with the Astros now. Still a good friend of mine. So he got hired by the Astros, and then I was approached to come on and try to build out this semi-private baseball training model. So, where and specifically on the pitching side, because that was something that I would say 3+ years ago was definitely a need in the industry. And there wasn't a place in the area that was servicing it. So we, that was three and a half, or a little less than 3.5 years ago. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah, and it's been great to kind of see the journey of what you guys have developed there. But I think what's unique to you as well is you've continued to further your education, not just in the pitching realm with doing all of your continuing education in pitching, but you've also gotten this master's degree in what?
My master's, I actually just completed my master's in motor learning and control.
Which makes it makes you completely unique to the space, right? Yeah. Because I think you have have the background as the baseball player, and so many people that are getting into kind of what you're doing, they just like baseball, they love baseball, they love the technique of pitching and how to optimize pitching, and then they just buy all $100,000 worth of equipment and track everything, and then try to base programs around that, right?
Yeah.
And I think you have all of that at Ascent, but then you also added this master's degree, this motor learning master's degree, which gives you a little bit more insight into how the brain articulates information to create movement. And how has that how have you seen that kind of influence some of, because what you're doing at Ascent is creating individualized, not just for throwing programs, but not just for pitchers, but individualized throwing programs to help people improve their velocity. But then also you've been really helpful because we also have a clinic inside Ascent as Precision Performance. And you've been really helpful in our rehab programs where we've been able to coordinate return to throwing with measurable metrics and your expertise to make sure that these guys are getting optimal outcomes with their process.
Yeah.
So how have you seen your degree work into that and help to improve what you're doing?
Yeah. So to touch on that, my undergrad degree was in economics, and through my own personal research process and how I was trying to learn and grow and develop as a coach, I really believed that you needed a background, and I didn't have that. And I was trying to sort of piece my way through learning on my own. But I knew I needed that formal education to make myself the best coach I could be. Because you're right, like there's no barrier to entry to be a baseball coach. Right. To be a PT, you have to get a doctorate. To be a baseball coach, you have to say you want to coach baseball. So, that in a lot of senses is a really good thing for the industry because it allowed me at age 18, 19 to coach. But on the flip side is when there's no set standards and there's no call it like an education base, you have people all over the spectrum on how they're trying to develop athletes. So that was really the why I went and pursued that education. And then to say that program was so valuable to me because it allowed me to get a pretty wide base and a wide range of, I would call it intro level stuff. We went pretty deep into some of the motor learning materials and some of the motor learning theory, but it was like a broader program that gave me touch points in a lot of different areas. It was motor learning, motor development, biomechanics, some neuroscience. I even took a couple courses in like group dynamics and things like that. So I was able to get, I would say like a broad education and then apply it all to coaching and apply it all to baseball.
Which is amazing. I've talked to you about this before. I just think it's so great that you went on and did that, and the perspective that now gives you in dealing with your athletes and creating your programs. Because, like you said, like you're seeing these guys from the adolescent 12, 13-year-old who has dreams of playing high school, like making their high school varsity team, to guys that are trying to make it from college to pro, to guys that are pros trying to make it to the next level of a professional athlete. So you're seeing all these different, there's similarities in all the age groups, but there's also a lot of differences. And to be able to navigate those differences of how you're creating a training program and then how you're relating to each of these guys with like the group dynamic stuff that you took, it has to be super useful that you went back and did that.
Oh, it's been invaluable.
Yeah, because then what's unique about Ascent too. So we had talked to Rob Rubina earlier about this, but you guys have created this semi-private training model, and this is where your group dynamics might come into it. Where can you describe kind of the model that you guys have, and then get into a little bit maybe the influence of how having like a 12 or 13-year-old training next to a pro athlete influences maybe the effectiveness of the program? And how you navigate the group dynamics in a group like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a semi-private training environment. So you could think of it like every single athlete that comes in, they have to start with an evaluation. During the eval, we get all their background info. Rob will assess their range of motion, flexibility, speed, power, exercise technique. I'll take them through a throwing evaluation where I'm looking at their throwing form. And if they're a pitcher, having them throw a bullpen, get them on a Rapsodo, which is a piece of technology that measures how the ball spins. And we'll get them on our Chronos high-speed camera. So you get video feedback and visual feedback on how your hand is releasing the ball with all of your pitches. So what we'll do from there is you break everything down. You say, hey, this is what we need to focus on in your program. And then the athletes will come in and they have a customized program in their the customized lifting program, customized throwing program, and then they're training alongside other athletes. So it's not group training because everyone has their own program, and it's also not a one-on-one lesson where it's just the coach and the athlete in the same session.
Right.
So going back to what you said about having so many different ranges of athletes in the building, that to me has been such a rewarding part of Ascent and part of what we do, because you get to see these call it 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, at times in the winter when we're really busy and guys are off from school, they'll be training alongside some of the pro guys, some of the college guys, and some of the older high school guys that have a higher training age. And I say you always have to be able to meet the demands of the athlete in front of you, right? So a 12-year-old is getting coached differently than a 22-year-old, but at the same time, being in that environment and seeing some of the kids, the younger kids, they have access to, and they're exposed to some really in-depth stuff to help them and guide them through their journey and their process. And really, like, everyone being together is such a cool dynamic because of the potential for learning and growth that happens organically through just a lot of people from different backgrounds and different ages and had different coaches being together.
Absolutely. And I think it's really cool the culture you guys have created there. You had 40 pro baseball guys there this past winter, maybe. Yeah.
About that.
And all of them, like, they're never big timing any of the kids. Like, I've seen them joke back and forth with the kids, and they form relationships with the kids where obviously a kid's looking up to him because maybe that's what the 13-year-old strives to be. But the pros have been really nurturing in supporting that kid and making the kid feel welcome and not nervous about being around somebody like that. Because I've been in those situations early on as an adolescent, and you get a little bit nervous. You're like, wow, like, that's so-and-so. And, but that you don't feel that at all in the facility, which is great.
No. I mean, that's the thing that's great is the pros. Yeah. They're getting their work in, but at the same time, they're able to interact with guys that are in high school, and you're right. They form relationships with them, and it's really a special culture.
Yeah, and I think with me not growing up in a baseball world, it's really helped me as these guys, because you'll see kids staying there for 4 hours a day.
Yeah,
like it becomes their hangout spot in the summer when they're off of school, because they're showing up, they're talking to whomever, their friends, they're coming with their friends, they're playing a little bit of ping pong, they're pitching or they're throwing, they're hitting, then they're working out. And, it's really cool to see the community that's developed, and where it just, everybody's welcoming and kids are just hanging out and they enjoy spending time there. And I think that's helping them get results because it becomes fun for them. It's not like quick in, quick out. You only have an hour before the next group comes in.
Right. Yeah. When, it's 4:00 and, you're throwing a bullpen and you're trying to hit a PR, and the center fielder for the Houston Astros is upstairs cheering you on.
Oh, it's great.
It's like Chazzy's the man, and that's the stuff that it just happens, and it's just so surreal because, there's like this, big gap between, people usually don't have access to professional athletes.
Hmm.
right? Young kids in the sport don't have access to people at the top. Um, and what we've been able to do is like just get rid of that barrier
Hmm.
uh, to an extent where it's like, oh yeah, I know Chad, or oh yeah, Bruce Zimmerman's, oh yeah, he throws
Hmm.
bullpens in here, right? And he showed me his changeup grip. Those types of things. It's a fun, you know, it's really a fun culture and a fun environment that we have.
Absolutely. Like there's nothing more electric than when the pros are throwing a live session right before spring training.
Yep.
Like the music's going, they're battling it out. Like
Yep.
I feel like that's a diamond in the rough of the Philly area that nobody knows about, but everybody should experience at some point.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you guys should have 500 people surrounding the field to watch that.
Yeah. Yeah. In pro live at bats, in January and February is some of the most is like the highlight of the year.
Yeah. And that's what makes Ascent special too, because we haven't described the facility. Like there's a full indoor baseball field where you can do the live at bats, but then there's a full hitting area, a full pitching throwing area with how many lanes do you have? So there's 4 bays in the hitting area.
Yep, 4 tunnels, four batting cages.
Mm-hmm.
I have 4 mounds.
Yeah.
We have a plyo wall for guys to throw their plyo balls into. We have a full field, and then we actually have nets on the field that can break off into cages. So we're maximizing the space and able to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's not a better facility as far as space and what's offered in the area that I know of. But so tell me, how do you craft your? Because I know there's certain philosophical differences in throwing programs or whatever. Tell us about like through your research and education, what the philosophical basis of how you're crafting your throwing programs that have seen you get such great results.
Yeah, I would say that the base, the foundation of it all is you're programming for the athlete in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everyone gets a customized program that's tailored to them, their needs, their wants, their goals. And that changes depending on the level, right? And depending on their training history. I think that we use a lot of the plyo balls. So those are like overweight or underweight soft balls that you can throw, and I like to use them as a chance for guys to really work on their mechanics in an environment where that's the only thing they're trying to focus on is executing an exercise in a specific way, right? You also get some training effect ball, in the sense that the arm will be in external rotation for a longer period of time. So you're getting, higher time under tension, but lower peak stress, right? So that's another way that we can train the arm. And then you're also just getting like variety, and you're not throwing the same, you're not just throwing a 5-ounce ball. So you're getting some proprioceptive effects of teaching the body how to move and throw a 1-pound ball, a 2-pound ball, an 8-ounce ball, a 3-ounce ball. So you're getting all of these effects that can compound and then generate good results.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like on the higher level side, on the pro side, right? There's a lot more nuance that goes into writing a throwing program for someone who has been throwing and training for, call it 15 years or so. But when a 25-year-old walks in, they know how they've had a level of success and a high level of success. So getting an understanding for what has made them successful and then how you can add to that success is where you get the most effective programming done. It's not, very rarely does an older athlete come in and I don't care, just give me whatever you want. George, just write whatever, I'll do it. Right? Like that's not effective, because that doesn't account for years and years and years of experience that has gotten the athlete to that level. And that's where you build a lot of trust and a lot of buy-in, where it's like, hey, we're going to collaborate on your program. Now, for younger athletes, for high school guys and middle school guys that don't have that experience, that's where I'll be more heavily, I'll more heavily like dictate what's going to go on. I'm going to write your program, and then if you have issues, some kids or some high school, college guys, they don't want to throw overweighted balls. That's totally fine, right? We just need to communicate so that if you have anxiety and if you have doubts about doing a certain thing, I need to know that as your coach, and then we need to just work around it. You don't need. There's a million different ways to get someone to throw harder, right? It centers around throwing. The tools you use to throw can be numerous, and there's no one way to do it.
Yeah, and I agree. And you just mentioned something interesting there. You said there's a million different ways to get someone to throw harder. But also there's great research that shows like it's the accumulation of volume for like maybe a major leaguer of why they might be tearing a UCL and need Tommy John surgery, right? So is there to some level, like any coach out there can make someone throw harder sometimes very easily with like the most minimal program or whatever, like most basic program, but taking into account the macro accumulation of reps and how that then fits into prepping for a major league season, which is what at this point, 182 games?
162.
162.
In 183 days, something like that. Yeah.
Right. Crazy. So there's a ton of volume there. Does that ever come into play when you're making a program for a pro athlete of, okay, you're going to have all of this volume coming. We need to make make sure your arm care program your arm is set so you're healthy going into the season, and we need to slowly ramp you up so you're hitting peak velocity as you're entering spring training or whatever. But then we don't want you doing all of these reps or all of these different training strategies so that you're fatigued by midseason or you're breaking down because you've done too much in the off season.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, interesting question. So I would say that for a pro guy, we're getting to by right. So the typical professional off season, season's done around September. Guys will start rolling in mid to late September, sometimes. And then usually what pitchers are going to do is they'll take 2 to 4 weeks off. I think the baseball world has shifted where not throw for 3 months, and quickly over the last few years especially, right, realize that that's not ideal when your job is to throw. You need to keep stress on those tissues and those muscles throughout the year so that you maintain some level of capacity. But so guys will often take a couple of weeks off, call it 2 to 4 weeks. And then their beginning stages, their on-ramping part of the program, they'll start by throwing 3 to 4 days a week. Then that bumps to 5, and then it bumps to 6. And while you're doing that, you're increasing frequency, volume, and intensity. Those 3 variables, I would say, like, depending on the athlete, right? You're increasing, but you're increasing all of those throughout the months that you're training. And then most of your big year with the lockout, guys went back late, but usually they'll report late January, and then they have spring training. They have 6 to 8 weeks of spring training to build up their volume a little bit more. So I'd say when guys leave here, and your minor league guys will leave a little bit later, but when guys leave here, usually like a starting pitcher will throw an inning or 2 in live at bats before they go, and then a bullpen throughout the week. And part of the programming and part of the the macro is that you're going to build up your volume and your intensity during spring training and during the early parts of the season. So that's part of something that I just say, like, hey, like the calendar takes care of itself with that stuff. And we don't need guys throwing a ton. We're not matching season demand in the winter as much.
Nice. But then, and while we're talking about the pro athletes, like it's obviously really cool to train a pro athlete and then watch them perform on the field, and all this money's on the line or whatever. But you guys really see as many pro athletes as you're seeing a ton more adolescent athletes, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Like, how does that fit into like these kids that are playing 2 and 3 teams year round, but still need to get into train to get their lift, to get their throwing, but protecting their arms? So again, like, they're not breaking down, but then they can maintain. If you're looking at the macro of a kid that wants to play in college and maybe has a chance at, making the pro level, how are you managing them as a 13, 14, 15-year-old when they're being pulled in all these different directions because they're a decent player and the high school team wants them, their, travel club wants them, but they have to maybe play for the local team to play on like, how are you managing all of that? Because I feel like they're almost very often getting more volume because of all the demands being placed on a decent player.
Yeah. You're 100% right. Your best kids and your best pitchers, they throw the most, and every team wants them to throw for them. So you have a lot of competing demands. The biggest thing I hang our hat on as a facility and as a group is that I think we do a phenomenal job of getting these kids better without injuring guys. As we said before, there are a million different ways to get guys to throw harder. It is very difficult to get guys to throw harder and stay healthy, and limiting injuries across the board with a large clientele. So, that's something that is the number one priority of any throwing program, of any training program, is your health. And then the performance gains that come from that are fantastic, but should not be, we're not aggressively training a 15-year-old to throw harder because guess what? The kid's 15. And we need to keep the perspective of you're healthy and you're able to play and you're able to keep training. You're able to accumulate that training volume and that training effect over time, that a lot of the performance gains will take care of themselves. So going back to what you asked about kids on different teams and playing all over the place, is communicate with the athletes what they should be doing. Okay. So general guidelines is you should probably only pitch for one team per season. So if you're in the high school level, right? High school is a little bit different because by that time, when they're in high school baseball, it's pretty much all they're doing is high school baseball, then travel baseball in the summer and usually in the fall as well. What we see is with guys that are younger, that 10, 11, 12, 13 range is when they're playing on a rec team, playing on a travel team, maybe playing on a middle school team as well. So in those situations, it's really important to communicate, hey, if you're throwing for X team, if you're pitching for your middle school team on a Thursday, you're not going to be expected to throw and pitch for your travel ball team on the weekend. And setting guidelines, helping people enforce them are paramount in making sure guys are staying healthy. The guys that get hurt most often are the ones that they go from not pitching a lot to pitching so much, and they're pitching for this team, and this coach said that he wanted him to pitch on this weekend, but the middle school coach asked him, or the high school coach asked him to throw for this team, and then you get a kid or parents that want to please everyone. In the process, they're increasing the risk of injury.
So what advice would you give like a new parent coming up? This is their first kid, first realm of, this kid's got some talent. He's playing on 2 or 3 teams. They want to please everyone. What kind of advice do you give to a new parent trying to, like, they understand it's something they need to manage, but they're not quite sure how to approach it? Is there any advice you could give to someone like that?
come in and talk to me.
Yeah, because I mean, you would know better than I would, but it seems like coaches are more on top of it, and they're doing the pitch counts, and parents are able to coordinate between coaches, and the coaches are a little bit more understanding. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So there's been a shift in baseball over the last 5 to 10 years or so that has really emphasized monitoring pitch counts, monitoring workload, um, so that kids aren't getting injured or getting
Mhm.
injured less frequently. If you're a parent and you're not sure how to navigate those waters and those fields, I'd say the easiest advice is pitch for one team, and then the other biggest thing, probably the biggest thing, is you have to have open lines of communication with the athlete, son,
Mhm.
daughter, whoever that is. If they aren't feeling good, they shouldn't throw that day. That's and they have to be comfortable communicating that with parents and coaches,
Mhm.
and then stick by it, right? I think that's where you know oftentimes kids don't want to either they don't want to admit they're sore or they're hurt because they want to play, and the other side of that is they don't want to upset the authority figure, the parent, the coach, their teammates. So you have a lot of psychological factors that also are going to contribute to managing injury and managing workload. Um,
Mhm.
so like the communication side is really important, and then being okay with, you know, hey, my arm doesn't feel good today. I know we're supposed to pitch. I know it's an important game, but I can't do it.
And
People
yeah,
that throw with soreness, athletes that throw with soreness, the paper, it's one of the Fleisig papers. They are like 36 times more likely to sustain a serious injury.
and that's super important. And I think a lot of the onus goes on these authority figures to make sure they create a safe space for a player to be able to voice that opinion, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it can, we've been athletes and we've been in the situations where it's intimidating to go to a coach and say I'm hurt and I can't play because of implications that we can all, assume. But I think it's imperative that as the authority figures, the parents, the coaches, that we create that safe space for a kid to be able to say that without fear of retribution of
Yep.
of anything, right? Because I think, like you said, in that Fleisig paper has put some numbers to it. Is the bottom line is you can't reach any level of performance or playing for your high school team or college or professionals if you can't even get on the field, right? So you know the yeah, you have to make sure that staying on the field is imperative. And that's why I think, as I've gotten older, and of course I'm in the industry, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think spending the money for the professionals to guide you in the right direction is a great investment in just the future and making sure that you stay healthy and you reach optimal performance and you get to the levels that you want to be. And I think the things that you guys are instilling, that we're all instilling, hopefully, in these athletes is just lifelong habits that will carry them through both athletics and into the future as they enter the workforce and all that stuff. Because we realize that, you're not going to be able to perform at high levels in athletics forever. And there's life after baseball or whatever sport. But the habits that you create while participating in sport have lifelong implications for entering the workforce and performing at high levels there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good stuff. So what as you've been working through this, have you found like what is your main motivation that kind of keeps you going? Because you work long hours. Like you're always whether you're going to games, you're analyzing a kid's program. I know your phones, you give everybody your cell phone number and you're talking to them about college choices or whatever. Like what's your motivation that keeps you going and working these long 16-hour days and I know a lot of what you do is very relationship driven, which is why you're going to these games and you're having these communications with them about college choices and stuff. And you've really become a role model to a lot of these kids, which is great. What keeps you going?
That's a great one, John. That's true.
Yeah.
Cell phone going off at all hours.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it, and my goal is to impact people's lives. Right. That's why I chose the profession of coaching. That's why I do what I do, is because I get to feel like I'm having a really positive impact on someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for your high school aged kids that oftentimes need a lot of guidance in the baseball space because they identify themselves as a baseball player and their whole sense of self is wrapped around baseball. And so that's why I do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I get to impact people's lives, and and I get to see their growth and see people go from, the freshman in high school who wants to get way better to someone who's worked for 3-4 years. I've been there 3 years, so call it 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're one of the best pitchers in the state. Or you get to see the pro guy who came in and got drafted and was a non-prospect, so not considered someone who's going to make the major leagues,
Mm-hmm.
to seeing them grow and develop and get way better, and now they're going to be a big leaguer and make life-changing money.
Mm-hmm.
So, the ability to have really rewarding relationships and work with people on something in a part of their life that's so important is what keeps me going.
Absolutely. And
I ain't stopping.
I love it. And I love the fact that you brought up like sense of self wrapped up in baseball, because that kind of brings it back together in some of the stuff we've been able to coordinate with. Like when a kid blows out his UCL and needs Tommy John surgery, and it's a 9-month plus rehab, right? And they've kind of lost that little bit of sense of self and identity. Like we've been able to find ways and coordinate training so they're not losing the community that you've created in Ascent in the baseball program, and being able to still have them hang around the people or like their friends, still feel like they're part of the team, still training, because we found ways to help them train around their injury initially, but then keep them involved when they get back toward a return to throwing and a throwing program. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that doesn't get lost in the fold of the psychology of the training, the psychology of the injury and the return to play. And I think that's really important, especially with an adolescent kid who's dealing with all the other crap that's going on in their life and transition period,
Yep. Yeah. I say that the most important part of my job and my role is the rehab guys.
Mm-hmm.
My TJ rehab, my Tommy John rehab didn't go well, and I didn't have the support system in place to help me through what was a really tough time for me. So, that's part of my mission, is to be that support system and be able to provide a lot of guidance for people that are going through a really challenging time. When you've played baseball your entire life and you're 17, 18, 22 years old, and you get a surgery, whether it's a Tommy John, which is, a 9 to 12 month recovery, or labrum, which is, if you're lucky, if you're lucky, 10, but 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
those labrums are really challenging. So to be able to provide, support, but then also like really quality, good programming on top of that is just so important, right? And there's not a lot of that in
Mm-hmm.
baseball. There's not a lot of that in, I think in physical therapy too, where you're able to, you're able to be there for someone in a challenging time when they have really large goals that they want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And I think it speaks to as some professional advice is, if you're out there as a skill coach, a performance coach, a physical therapist, like whomever, like surround yourself with quality professionals that complement your services so you can support the athlete in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Right. And
I mean,
same, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, I mean, when you have, if you're an injured baseball player, come and talk to me. Come and talk to John.
Mhm.
Because, especially post-op guys, like to be there and say, oh yeah, when you're going through your beginning throwing things and you feel something in your arm, to have the coach there that says, oh, I've done a dozen TJ rehabs, or I've done this many return to throws, you're fine. This is normal to have some discomfort and some, uh, a little setback or whatever it is, right? To just
Mhm.
have someone a professional with you to guide you along that process is invaluable for easing the anxieties that are going to come from a rehab program.
Absolutely. So as the consumer too, and this goes for, we've been talking a lot about arm injuries because you're working a baseball specific facility, but any injury for an athlete, like make sure as a consumer, you're finding the professionals that have a network of people that can make sure all of the needs are taken care of. And you're not just another number showing up for an hour session here and there, but it's be a coordinated effort to make sure you're getting the optimal outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, and you guys are the best with rehabs,
I
right?
appreciate it. Thank you.
Like we have, I mean, just recently, like in the last, we had a labrum that worked with Troy heavily, and he came back to play, and Nick Perugini,
Hmm.
um, but who came back 10 and a half months post-op and
Yeah.
played in the game. Labrums don't do that. We have another one who's who's a month behind him, who's doing well as well. We
Hmm.
have a couple of TJs that are, again, 10 and a half back to pre-performance levels. Uh, and, every rehab has lots of challenges,
Hmm.
but if you don't get the right coaching and the right physical therapy early on, you're setting yourself up for a way tougher time.
Right.
We have another labrum who, athlete is X months post surgery and they're not lifting yet, right?
Hmm.
And they're not being pushed in their rehab. And, at that same time, if they were rehab with you guys, it would be, they'd be further along. I think there's a lot of like, you know, people get kind of comfortable doing what they're doing, and there's not always that push, and it's worked in the past, so why try to change it?
Hmm.
Mindset, and like the rehab protocols that were in place 15 years ago to rehab an arm are not the standard anymore.
Right.
Especially with the stuff that John, that you guys will do, and then the stuff that we do on the throwing side.
Hmm.
Those programs that were written 15, 20 years ago by the docs is not meeting the demands of the athlete in front of you.
I just think as if you understand the healing process and where they are in that process, because as you're saying these great timelines of someone back to performance levels, we're not putting them back quickly where they're set up for re-injury.
No,
We're making sure we're taking them through progressions. You're measuring the metrics as they're going back to throwing. We're dealing with some of the setbacks that are inevitable, and we're using, especially you in your throwing programs, you're using objective measures to make sure that they're ready to go back to that level. Right? We're not just putting them out there to say, "Oh, you're feeling great. We're going to look awesome if we get you back in 10 months. Go out." we're we're making sure it's appropriate because we don't want these kids to get hurt. Like we understand they don't want to be in a rehab setting. They want to be out on the field performing, right? Because they have goals. So we're not just returning them quickly very often, and not every athlete's like that. But when they're getting those good results of returning in 10 and a half months after a labrum, it's objectively measured and it's the appropriate thing to do.
right, right.
Yeah.
You know, Getting that
Um,
feedback from what we'll do on the throwing side is we have it's called a pulse sensor that it attaches to the forearm, and it measures arm speed and shoulder rotation and elbow torque.
Mm-hmm.
You get to track the progress of the arm over time, in addition to monitoring volume, and then you can monitor intensity with a radar gun.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This isn't to say that we don't have, to your point, we're not having people early on try to throw as hard as they can. That takes months and months and months and months and months. But to give the more objective feedback you can give someone in a rehab program, the better off and the clearer picture they're going to have on where they're at and where they're going to go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's great stuff. And it just speaks to going back to, there's always an appropriate way to train, right? You just have to find the right people that'll train you appropriately, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right. Because, there's great research on the crossover effect, where if you have a right knee injury, you keep training your left leg, you maintain total body strength, because, the hormone response is systemic. It's not particular to just you training the left leg. Right. You just have to make sure you find the right professionals that understand the injury process, how that integrates with training. And then that's how you're getting these outcomes where these guys are returning more quickly than expected, because they haven't lost a ton, where the first stage of them getting back into training is just recouping what they had lost over a couple months of being sedentary. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So what's next for you? You guys are doing some great stuff. I know you have some stuff in the works. What's next for George?
Yeah. So I would say, as I increase what I'm doing on for my role, my main objective is to try to develop materials and educational resources to give to coaches. Mm-hmm. I have them in the works for what I've used to train interns and staff underneath me, but working on getting that to a central site and making that a product that can be available to parents, other coaches, and have a wider reach, so that those coaches can instill some of the stuff that we're doing here to their population and their athletes.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love it. All right. So I finish all of these with final 5 quick fire questions, just to give everybody a little bit more insight into who George Zirkel is. You ready?
Shoot.
You seem a little bit nervous about this, George.
I'm nervous.
What would be your walkout song?
I don't know.
Did you have one in college?
No. I was a D3 player. I was the mom. And they don't give you any songs. I'd probably go with an Eminem song. I don't know which one. That was my probably favorite rapper growing up.
Okay. Lose Yourself's the classic.
Yeah, that's a classic. I'd probably go with that.
All right. What's your favorite exercise?
Bench press.
Really? Not bicep, not curls? Curls for the girls?
Bicep curls, bench press. 1A, 1B.
Love it. One food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Pizza.
Any specific toppings?
I'm a hot sauce on my pizza guy.
Ooh, we could go down that path. What kind of hot sauce?
I'll go Frank's. Frank's Red Hot. Classic.
Okay. Along those lines, what's your one guilty pleasure?
I love to eat my Nutella.
All right. You just go by the spoon?
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong with Nutella. You can't go wrong with Nutella.
So good.
Oh, yeah. And then what's your favorite thing about the Philadelphia area?
I love Delco. I love the people. That's what I love. Yeah.
Love it. And I guess we kind of forgot to mention, I don't know if we mentioned this when Rob was on, but Ascent is in Garnet Valley in Delco, right on 322 on Westchester exit on 95. So I guess you've come to know and love Delco super well.
Yes, sir.
All right. I love it. All right, George. So where can people keep up with you? How can they get best in contact you if they want to train with you or they want to keep up to date on when you might be releasing some of this continuing education stuff? What's the best way to kind of follow you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I would say Twitter and Instagram. I'm active on both. So username George_Zirkel. I think that's what it is on both. And email. Anyone can email me at any time with any questions. gzirkel@ascentathlete.com. Yeah.
Cool.
Follow me there.
Excellent, George. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you've done in kind of expanding my knowledge in the space and then how we've just been able to coordinate. It's been a great, seamless effort in making sure that all of our athletes achieve optimal outcomes. So I appreciate you and thanks for hopping on today.
Right on, John. Thank you.